Jake Martinez pulled into the empty parking lot of Sunny Acres Nursing Home at exactly 11 p.m., his beat-up Honda the only car in sight. The night shift paid double, and after 3 months of unemployment, he couldn't afford to be picky. The building looked pleasant enough in the darkness, a sprawling single-story complex with cheerful yellow siding and flower boxes under every window. But something felt off about the silence. "You must be Jake," said a thin woman emerging from the main entrance. Her uniform was pristine white, and her smile was too wide. "I'm Ms. Holloway, the night supervisor. So glad you could start tonight." Jake shook her cold hand. "Thanks for the opportunity. I know it was short notice." "Oh, we're always short-staffed on nights, Ms. Holloway said, leading him through the lobby. "Most people can't handle the unique requirements of overnight care." The interior was exactly what Jake expected from a nursing home: beige walls, fluorescent lighting, the faint smell of disinfectant mixed with something else he couldn't identify. Framed photos of smiling elderly residents lined the hallways, though Jake noticed their eyes seemed to follow him as he walked past. "Your job is simple, Ms. Holloway explained as they stopped at the nurse's station. "Make your rounds every hour, check on the residents, and document anything unusual. Most importantly, never disturb the residents during feeding hour." Feeding hour? 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. The residents have special dietary needs. Very specific timing. During that hour, stay in this office and don't leave for any reason. Don't listen to any sounds you might hear. Don't investigate any disturbances. Just wait it out." Jake nodded, though unease settled in his stomach. "What kind of sounds, Ms.?" Holloway's smile faltered for just a moment. "Probably nothing. Old buildings make noise." "But Jake?" She gripped his arm with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll stay in this office during feeding hour. For your own safety." Jake's first few hours passed uneventfully. He made his rounds through the 3 wings of the facility: East Wing, West Wing, and North Wing. Each housed about 20 residents in private rooms. Most were sleeping peacefully, though he noticed they all seemed unusually pale, even for elderly people. In the East Wing, he found Mrs. Chen sitting up in bed, staring at the wall with vacant eyes. "Are you all right, Mrs. Chen?" Jake whispered. She turned toward him, and Jake stepped back. Her eyes were completely black, pupils dilated to the point where no iris was visible. "Are you here for feeding hour?" she asked in a voice like rustling paper. No, I'm just checking on everyone." "Do you need anything?" Mrs. Chen smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "Not yet. But soon. We're all so hungry, you know. So very hungry." Jake backed out of the room, his heart racing. Medical condition, he told himself. Some kind of medication side effect. But in the West Wing, he found Mr. Garrett standing at his window, also with the same black eyes, pressing his face against the glass as if trying to push through it. "The new one?" Mr. Garrett whispered without turning around. "Fresh blood. It's been so long since we had fresh blood." Jake decided to head back to the nurse's station early. While waiting for 3 a.m., Jake decided to review the resident files to better understand their conditions. What he found in the filing cabinets made no sense. Every single resident had been admitted on the same date, October 31st, 1987, 38 years ago. But according to their current ages, they should all be well over 100 years old. Some should be 120 or even 130. Yet they all looked like they were in their 70s or 80s. Jake found admission photos from 1987. The residents looked exactly the same as they did now. Not older, not younger. Exactly the same. In Mrs. Chen's file, he found a medical note from 1987. Patient exhibits extreme photosensitivity and requires a liquid-only diet. Shows signs of rapid cellular regeneration. Recommend indefinite observation. Mr. Garrett's file contained similar notes. Patient demonstrates enhanced physical strength and unusual dental development. Dietary restrictions. Liquid nutrition only, administered at night. Every file contained the same dietary notation. Special feeding requirements, liquid nutrition only, 3 to 4 m daily. Jake looked at the clock. 2:47 a.m. 13 minutes until feeding hour. At exactly 3 m, Jake heard the first sound, a soft clicking noise coming from the east wing. It sounded like fingernails tapping on glass, rhythmic and patient. Then came the whispers. At first, Jake thought it might be residents talking in their sleep, but the whispers were coming from everywhere at once. The walls, the ceiling, the ventilation system. He couldn't make out words, just a constant, hungry murmuring. Jake gripped the arms of his chair and stared at the clock. 3:07 a.m. 53 minutes to go. The clicking sounds grew louder, joined by what sounded like footsteps in the hallways. But these weren't the shuffling steps of elderly residents. They were quick, predatory movements, like animals stalking prey. Jake's radio crackled to life. "Jake? Jake, are you there?" It was Miss Holloway's voice, but distorted, as if she were speaking through water. "I'm here," Jake whispered. "Good boy. Stay exactly where you are. Don't look outside. Don't open the door. They're very excited tonight. It's been months since we had someone new." "Miss Holloway, what's happening out there?" Static filled the radio for a moment before her voice returned. "Feeding hour, Jake. Just like I told you." Jake couldn't help himself. Against every instinct and Ms. Holloway's explicit instructions, he crept to the office window and peered through the blinds. The hallway was filled with the residents, but they weren't the frail elderly people he'd seen earlier. They moved with fluid grace, their backs straight, their movements predatory. Mrs. Chen glided past the window, and Jake saw that her fingernails had grown into claws. Mr. Garrett followed, his mouth open to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. They were heading toward the main entrance. Jake heard a vehicle pull up outside, a van with Sunset Blood Bank painted on the side. Two workers in white coats began unloading coolers, the kind used to transport blood donations. Through the window, Jake watched as Ms. Holloway met them at the door. But she looked different now, younger, stronger, her movements unnaturally smooth. "Right on time," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "The residents are very hungry tonight." Jake watched in horror as the residents gathered around the delivery workers, forming a circle. The blood bank workers seemed dazed, their eyes unfocused, as if they were sleepwalking. Mrs. Chen spoke first. "It's been too long since we fed properly. The blood bags sustain us, but nothing compares to fresh feeding." Jake realized the truth with sickening clarity. This wasn't a nursing home, it was a feeding facility. The residents weren't elderly humans at all. They were something else, something that had been masquerading as humans for decades, feeding on blood donations to survive. And tonight, they were getting something special. Chapter 6. The Hunt. Jake tried to call 911, but his phone had no signal. The radio was silent. He was completely cut off from the outside world. Through the window, he watched as the residents began feeding on the blood bank workers. It wasn't violent or messy. It was almost ritualistic, each resident taking turns to drink directly from the neck while their victims stood placidly, as if hypnotized. When they were finished, the blood bank workers stumbled back to their van and drove away, apparently with no memory of what had happened. But Jake could see they were paler, weaker, moving like people who had donated too much blood. Ms. Holloway looked directly at the office window. Jake ducked, but he knew she'd seen him. "Jake," her voice came through the intercom system. "I know you're watching. Why don't you come out and meet everyone properly?" Jake heard footsteps approaching the office. Slow, patient footsteps that stopped right outside the door. "We know you're curious." Mrs. Chen's voice drifted through the door. "We can smell your fear, your excitement. You want to understand what we are." "We're not monsters, Jake," Mr. Garrett added. "We're just different. Evolved. We've lived here peacefully for decades, taking only what we need to survive." Ms. Holloway's voice was closer now, right against the door. "The blood bank donations keep us alive, but they don't make us strong. For that, we need fresh feeding. And Jake, you smell so very fresh." Jake backed against the far wall as the door handle began to turn. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, though he doubted it would help against creatures that had lived for over a century. The door opened and Ms. Holloway entered, followed by several residents. In the fluorescent lighting, Jake could see them clearly now. Their skin had a waxy, preserved quality, their eyes were completely black, and their teeth were sharp as razors. "Don't be afraid, Ms. Holloway said. "We're not going to kill you. We need you." "For what?" "To help us," Mrs. Chen explained, gliding closer. "You see, Jake, we can't leave this facility during daylight hours. We're photosensitive, and the blood bank has been asking questions about their missing inventory. We need someone who can work during the day, someone who can arrange for more substantial meals." Jake realized they wanted him to become their accomplice, to help lure victims to the facility. "What if I refuse?" Ms. Holloway smiled sadly. "Then you'll join the night shift permanently. We'll feed on you just enough to change you, but not enough to kill you. You'll become like us, dependent on blood, trapped here forever, helping us survive. But if you help willingly," Mr. Garrett added, "we'll make it worth your while. Money, power, immortality. We've accumulated quite a bit of wealth over the decades." Jake looked at the clock. 3:52 a.m. 8 minutes until feeding hour ended. "I need time to think," Jake said. "Of course, Ms. Holloway nodded. "You have until tomorrow night to decide." "But Jake, don't try to leave. Don't try to call anyone. This facility is our territory, and we'll know if you attempt to betray us." At exactly 4 a.m., the residents returned to their rooms, resuming their roles as harmless elderly patients. Ms. Holloway walked Jake to his car, her demeanor once again that of a normal nursing supervisor. "See you tomorrow night, Jake," she said cheerfully. "I hope you'll make the right choice." Jake drove home in a daze, his mind reeling. He had evidence of what he'd seen, photos on his phone, notes he'd written. But who would believe him? And even if they did, what could be done? The creatures had been living at Sunny Acres for decades, apparently with some kind of arrangement with the blood bank. Jake spent the day researching the facility. He found records going back to its opening in 1987, but nothing about what it had been before. However, in the local newspaper archives, he found something interesting. A story from October 30th, 1987, about a bus crash on the highway near the facility. 38 passengers presumed dead after bus plunged into ravine. Bodies never recovered due to difficult terrain and risk of further landslides. 38 passengers. 38 residents at Sunny Acres. Jake realized the truth. These weren't creatures masquerading as humans. They were humans who had died in the crash but somehow returned as something else. Vampiric beings that needed blood to sustain their unnatural existence. As night approached, Jake made his decision. Jake returned to Sunny Acres that night, but he wasn't alone. He'd spent the day making calls, reaching out to contacts he'd made during his time working security. 3 men waited in the parking lot, not police who might not believe the story, but private individuals who specialized in problems that couldn't be solved through conventional means. Remember, Jake told them, they're strongest during feeding hour, but vulnerable to sunlight. We need to keep them contained until dawn. Jake entered the facility alone, playing his part as the conflicted employee. Ms. Holloway greeted him with that too wide smile. "Jake, have you made your decision?" "I have," Jake said. "I want to know more. Show me everything." Ms. Holloway's smile became genuine. "Wonderful. The residents will be so pleased." She led him through the facility, explaining their operation in detail. The blood bank arrangement had taken years to establish. They had someone on the inside who diverted expired blood donations to them. They fed regularly but sparingly, never taking enough to attract attention. But recently, Ms. Holloway admitted, the donated blood hasn't been enough. "We're growing weaker. We need fresh feeding more frequently, which means we need someone who can help us acquire volunteers." They reached the common room, where all 38 residents were waiting. They looked more human now, but Jake could see the predatory intelligence in their black eyes. "Jake has agreed to help us, Ms. Holloway announced. The residents smiled, revealing their sharp teeth. "Actually," Jake said, checking his watch, "I've decided to do something else." It was 2:58 a.m. Jake's team moved quickly and efficiently. They'd spent hours preparing, sealing every window and door, installing industrial UV lights throughout the facility, and cutting the power to ensure no one could shut off the lights remotely. As feeding hour began, the residents transformed into their true predatory forms, but found themselves trapped. Jake's team had blocked every exit, and the UV lights were strategically positioned to cover every room and hallway. "You don't understand, Ms. Holloway snarled, her facade finally dropping completely. "We're not evil. We're survivors. We didn't choose this existence." "Maybe not," Jake said, "but you chose to prey on innocent people. You chose to perpetuate it instead of finding another way." The creatures tried to fight, but the UV lights weakened them significantly. Some tried to hide in the shadows, but Jake's team had been thorough. There was nowhere to go. As dawn approached, Jake opened every window, blind, and door. Natural sunlight poured into the facility, and the creatures began to smoke and dissolve, their preserved forms finally succumbing to the passage of time they'd been avoiding for 37 years. Mrs. Chen was the last to fade. As the sunlight touched her, she looked almost peaceful. "Thank you," she whispered. "We've been so tired for so long." One by one, they crumbled to dust, finally finding the rest that had been denied them since the night of the bus crash. The Sunny Acres nursing home was demolished 6 months later. The official story was that the building had structural problems and was condemned. Jake never spoke publicly about what had happened that night, but he did ensure that the blood bank conducted a thorough audit of their procedures. They found that someone had been diverting expired blood donations for years, though they never discovered who. The diversion stopped after the night Jake cleaned out Sunny Acres. Jake left town shortly after, but he kept in touch with the blood bank director. She told him that in the weeks following the facility's closure, they had dozens of reports from regular donors saying they felt stronger and healthier than they had in years. People who had been unknowingly feeding something that should have died decades ago. Jake took a job at a hospital in another state, working day shifts exclusively. He never worked nights again, and he never took another job he couldn't fully investigate first. But sometimes, when he walked past nursing homes or assisted living facilities, he would pause and listen. Listen for the sounds that didn't belong, the clicking of claws on glass, the whisper of voices that were too hungry, too patient, too old. Because Jake learned something important that night at Sunny Acres. Not every building filled with the elderly is what it appears to be. And not everyone who offers a job that pays too well for work that seems too easy has honest intentions. The feeding hour ended that night, but Jake remained vigilant, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, other creatures might be waiting for someone desperate enough to take the night shift. Some hungers never truly die, they just find new places to hide.